Haunted 3i/Atlas exposed. Sinister miniature geysers erupt in spine-chilling unexplained awakening. Lila glanced at the evening sky, the sun dipping behind the houses of Maplewood, painting the world in deeper shadows. The laughter of her kids echoed through their backyard, a sound growing more precious with each passing day. But the terror in Lila's heart festered, an unwelcome intruder. It pulsed under her skin like a heartbeat. Just last week, she was let go from the diner, and the rhythm of her life now had a sinister undertone. It was the gas station job at night that kept them afloat, but the emptiness of those late hours seeped into her bones. Tonight, Jamie and Ruby stumbled upon peculiar, mini eruptions in the grass, water spraying into the air, sparkling like long-buried dreams. Their delighted shrieks broke through Lila's haze, grounding her in the moment. But that joy twisted into something sinister as the shadows deepened. An unsettling silence settled around them, punctuated only by the rustle in the trees. It was as if the night watched not a comforting shadow, but an embodiment of dread lingering just beyond her porch light. Lila felt it creeping in, a sensation of something lurking just beyond sight. "What are those geysers?" she mused aloud, masking her unease. The children splashed, oblivious to her eyes darting to the woods. But the laughter faded as the days wore on. It became strained, Jamie's vibrant energy dimmed, his eyes now flickering with fear. Ruby, too, shivered before the shadows, frightened by murmurs that skimmed through the air like a chilling breeze. Then rumors swept Maplewood like wildfire, people disappearing, last seen near those horrendous geysers. Lila's heart beat faster. The creeping anxiety began to chip away at her rational mind. "It's just stories," she reassured herself, forcing a laugh when Jamie wanted to stay inside. But when the news reached her that Mrs. Thompson was gone, replaced only by whispers of caution, dread clutched harder. They visited the playground the next day, and even there, echoes of banter felt misplaced, contaminated with whispers of something dark. When Lila approached the authorities, they shrugged it off as the isolation-induced paranoia of a single mother. "Maybe you should consider moving," Mr. Barnett proposed with a sympathetic smile, but the way his eyes flickered unsettled her like he already knew something she didn't. The manicured lawns now loomed ominous, as if every blade of grass held secrets in its roots. She dug into the past, late at night, while the children slept, poring over old family journals. Fragments spoke of ancient spirits and land cursed by disturbance, of folklore entwined with dark roots, awakening when the earth unsettled. Lila's thoughts spiraled into an endless abyss. Was it just a story? Or was she too close to something terrifying? As darkness engulfed her world, she could almost hear the calls of her children. The fading giggles were replaced by muffled cries. Every night, the fearful dreams escalated. Shadows emboldened, clawing at the edges of her sanity. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Then came that night, the clouds swollen with rain, a suffocating tension in the air. The door rattled, a frantic knock, her children crying from the other side. As she turned the handle, dread suffused her whole being. "What is it, Mommy?" Jamie whimpered, his eyes wide. But a voice echoed from the darkness behind her. "Leave while you can." And she felt the presence closing in, creeping in for what was hers. Lila's heart pounded in her chest as she pushed open the door, the dim light barely penetrating the thick shadows drowning her home. Jamie and Ruby tumbled in, their faces pale, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Mommy, we heard something in the yard," Ruby whimpered, clinging to her brother. The air dripped with a foreboding chill, and she felt her skin crawl. The wind outside howled like a chorus of lost souls, pulling at the edges of her sanity. She shut the door quickly, the sound reverberating through the space, sealing them inside, but it felt like it had opened the floodgates of terror. "Let's go to bed," Lila said, forcing a calmness that felt like a lie even as the words left her mouth. She led them down the dark hallway, thoughts racing. They needed safety, a protective cocoon from whatever darkness pulsed just outside their walls. As the children climbed into bed, Lila sat on the edge, trying to ignore the uneasy thrumming of her heart. "Do you remember what we talked about? Those are just stories meant to scare us," she said, though her own doubts lingered, festering in her mind. The boys' hopeful nods felt flimsy against the backdrop of the night outside. Just then, the shrill ring of her phone sliced through the heavy silence. It was her neighbor, Claire, breathless and frantic. "Lila! Have you seen anyone? Joe he's not here. He went to check on the geysers and hasn't he come back?" The mention of Joe sent ice coursing through Lila's veins. "What do you mean? How long has he been gone?" "Since sunset. I don't like the way it's feeling outside. The wind. It sounds wrong." Lila's grip on the phone tightened, her next breath tremulous. I'll ask around. Just hold tight, Claire." As she hung up, unease bundled tightly in her chest. The geysers had birthed not just water but also horror, and now Joe was another name added to the growing list of disappearances. She glanced at her children, their small faces illuminated by the flickering light of the night lamp. "Mommy, please don't go outside." Jamie clung to her leg, fear breaking through the facade of bravery they had built. "I have to check," she replied softly, but inside conflict brewed like a storm. Every part of her screamed to stay within the safety of their home, but she could not ignore the gnawing but persistent urge to find answers, to unravel whatever curse had befallen Maplewood. Grabbing a flashlight, Lila stepped outside, the beam of light jittering across the grass. Shadows danced, alive and writhing. The geysers bubbled quietly, the water glistening eerily in the weak light. "Joe!" she called, her voice swallowed by the wind. An uneasy rustle followed, the trees sighing like they were imparting secrets. As Lila edged closer to the geysers, the earth trembled beneath her feet. Her heart raced as she spotted something protruding from the ground, a dark shape, half concealed by mounds of dirt. Hope mingled with dread as she knelt down, fingers trembling, brushing away the earth. But then she froze, a cold realization settling in. It was clothing torn, muddy, and unmistakably familiar. "No," she whispered. A bone-deep horror twisted in her gut. Before she could comprehend what it meant, the shadows deepened, swirling. A whisper caressed the back of her neck, breathing words she didn't want to hear. "You've awakened us." Lila's blood ran cold as shadowy forms began to materialize, shapes lurking in the gathering darkness. Panic surged up her throat. She turned to run, but the ground seemed to rise against her. Nightmares babbled from the woods, and she stumbled backward, fear gripping her heart like a vice. She needed to get back to her children now. As she sprinted toward the house, the landscape warped, shadows reaching for her as if hungry for her very soul. Just before she crossed the threshold, she glanced back at the geysers. The water twisted and churned, morphing into faces, their eyes locked onto her in a mournful wail. "Mom!" Jamie's voice sliced through the terror, grounding her. She bolted inside and slammed the door shut, her heart racing beyond reason. But the faint sounds of laughter still echoed in the distance, a haunting melody of what lay beyond. Lila leaned against the door, breathless, eyes darting to the windows as the wind howled its dreadful song. She hadn't felt the weight of true fear until now, and it was only a matter of time before it came knocking again. The night had drawn its curtain, but the performance was far from over. What awaited her in the shadows? Lila pressed her back against the solid door, her mind racing as she attempted to process what had just transpired. The laughter outside twisted into something foul and mocking, filling her ears with an echo that felt both familiar and grotesque. She quickly turned her focus back to her children, still nestled in their beds, their faces pale, eyes wide with fear. "Mommy?" Ruby whispered, her small voice barely rising above the wind's wail. Lila hurried to their side, hoping to shield them from the horrors lurking just beyond their walls. "It's okay, sweetie," she said, forcing a reassuring smile. But the quiver in her voice betrayed her, revealing her own uncertainty. Just moments ago, she had been confronted with the sinister reality of a threat that cloaked itself in shadow. What happened? Jamie asked, his brow furrowed, struggling to comprehend the danger they had barely escaped. There was just some wind, she lied, unable to admit the truth of what she had encountered. Her thoughts drifted back to the clothing she had unearthed, a tangible piece of Joe's still clinging to the earth. Terror knotted in her stomach. A crack erupted outside, shaking the house. Lila's heart raced as she moved instinctively closer to the children, holding them like a shield against the dark chaos. But the house felt all too fragile, the door shuddering as if it could crumble under the weight of the shadows. Do you think we should call someone? Ruby's question was a whisper, weighing heavy in the air. I'll do that. Lila forced herself to step away from the children, grabbing her phone and fumbling with trembling fingers. But when she flicked the screen, there was no signal. Static filled her heart, desperation clawed within. The wind howled again, now morphed into a symphony of cries that pushed her toward madness. She dashed to the window, throwing open the curtain with a shaky breath. Outside, the landscape pulsed, each shadow twisting and contorting, alive and watching. The geysers bubbled menacingly, steam rising like phantoms. She could still hear that laughter. Was it real? Or was it her mind betraying her, unraveling in the wake of unearthly terror? Suddenly, a fleeting figure darted past her yard, a transient glimpse of something pale and wiry. Lila caught her breath, heart drumming loudly in her ears. Mommy, I don't like it, Ruby whimpered, inching closer to Jamie. Hearing their fear fueled Lila's urgency. She had to protect them, somehow. She moved swiftly to the kitchen, where the knives gleamed under the dim light. Would they help? Panic bubbled up as her eyes darted around, searching for something, anything, to ward off whatever loomed outside. She grabbed a butcher's knife, the cool metal grounding her, sparking brief, cold confidence. Then, from the corner of her eye, she caught movement again. This time, it was closer, a figure, a shadow pushing through the haze of her backyard. It stopped, and for just a moment, their eyes locked. The face was human but twisted, drenched in an eerie glow that throbbed like a heartbeat. Fear coiled tightly around her heart. Mom, what is that? Jamie's voice broke through the haze of terror, but she was frozen, rooted to the spot. Before she could answer, a dull thud echoed against the door, sending shockwaves through her body. Let us in, the voice resonated, a choir of whispers merging into one chilling plea that slithered into her ears. Mom! The kids cried out, their fear tangible, punching through Lila's paralyzed state. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting long, grotesque shadows that reached out like claws. The air thickened, potent with the scent of something rotten and alive, congealing around her. Stay close. Don't open the door, she shouted, feeling the weight of dread crash down upon them. But the dreadful laughter began again, rising in cacophony and spinning like an eerie tapestry surrounding them. It was all too much, the weight of secrets, shadows crying for release. Would they invade their home, dragging Lila and her children into the depths of despair? Make it stop, Ruby whimpered, hiding her face against Jamie's shoulder. Then the doorknob rattled fiercely, as if something was desperate to break through. Lila gripped the knife tighter, adrenaline surging as the next throaty whisper slithered through, You've disturbed us, and now you must pay. Her breath caught in her throat as a chilling realization struck her. They were not just shadows. They were something else entirely, living outside the boundaries of reality. And they were hungry for her, hungry for the truth buried beneath the geysers that had awakened after years of slumber. As minutes spiraled into an eternity, Lila screamed inwardly, knowing that fight or flight would soon transform into a battle against the very shadows that promised to consume them. But what lay beyond that door? How would it end? The walls around her creaked ominously, and with every rattling breath she was left with one haunting question: would tomorrow ever come? The doorknob rattled violently, taunting Lila as the whispers intensified, melding into a singular voice that sent chills racing down her spine. Open the door, Lila. You know what you must do. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to take a breath, but her lungs felt heavy, suffocated by dread. Gripping the knife, she considered her options: run, hide, or confront the dark terror outside. But she refused to let them in. Not now. Not ever. "Mommy, please!" Ruby pleaded, her voice trembling. Lila turned, panic crashing over her, wishing she could erase the fear etched into her children's eyes. "Stay here," she commanded, her voice a fierce whisper. With every fiber of her being, she needed to make them believe that she could protect them. She edged toward the door, heart thrumming wildly against her chest. The whispers coiled tighter around her mind, taunting her, reminding her of the secrets she had buried long ago. What if the truth was worse than the horror prowling outside? "Mommy, is it Joe?" Jamie dared to ask, breaking the silence that hung in the air like a fragile glass ornament ready to shatter. His question sent a dagger of ice straight through her heart. She couldn't entertain that thought. Joe was gone. It couldn't be him. But then, what were they? A chill swept through the house, like icy fingers trailing across her skin. She could almost see the shadows slithering around the walls, whispering her worst fears back to her. The landscape seemed to pulse, a living entity squeezed between moments of unease. "Lila!" came the voice again, louder, more insistent. "Let us in, we can help you. You're in danger." "From who?" she shouted back, defiance rising like fire in her belly. But her words came out shaky, underscoring the very fear that sparked her fight. Suddenly, the laughter twisted again, growing deeper, vibrating through the wood of the door, resonating with something ancient and dark. It struck a chord within her, awakening fears that had long lain dormant. She remembered stories, whispers of those who had learned too late what lay beneath the geysers. In her gut she felt a pull. To know the truth could unravel everything. Would uncovering it save her family or destroy them faster? "Mom?" Jamie's bright eyes zoomed in on hers, searching for reassurance. They were counting on her. Lila swallowed hard, feeling the knife slip a little in her grip, her strength wavering. "Nothing will break us," she yelled, the terror swirling like a tempest around her shoulders. Another thud hit the door, harder this time, splitting her focus and sending a jolt through her body. The shadows were growing impatient, pressing in, folding themselves into her home like a tightening noose. "Stay back!" she barked, inching closer to the door, heart pounding against the walls of her chest. The whispers turned furious. "Let us in! We have so much to show you. Come outside now!" she screamed. A low growl resonated through the walls, shaking the very foundation of the house, and the lights flickered again, just as a low, dragging sound reached her ears. Something was scraping across the exterior, claws on wood, yearning to break through. "Mommy, please, make it stop!" Ruby wailed, throwing herself against Jamie, their small forms trembling. Lila's resolve was melting, panic seeping back into her mind. They needed to escape. But how? The door was their only barrier, and it was growing weaker by the second, the wood groaning under the strain of whatever threat loomed outside. "Stand back!" she shouted one last time, clutching the knife like a lifeline. Then it stopped. Silence enveloped the house. Lila's heart froze. Her breathing came in shallow bursts, and she strained to hear any hint of what had just been out there. Was it a trick? Was the darkness merely biding its time? "Mom?" Jamie whispered, fear draping his words. Before Lila could respond, the quiet was shattered by a renewed rage, a massive crash that sent the door shuddering on its hinges, splintering the fragile barrier between them and the unknown. Fear engulfed her. Something was coming. Something she didn't understand. In that pivotal moment, Lila knew she had to uncover the truth hiding just beyond the door, or they would never be safe. And whatever waited on the other side craved more than the darkness, it wanted to devour her whole. Would she fight, or was retreat the only escape? The air was thick with apprehension as she braced for impact, waiting to see what horror awaited her. The doors shattered inward, splintering like dry kindling as a wave of unnatural cold rolled into the room. Lila stumbled back, dragging Ruby and Jamie with her, their small bodies colliding with the wall. Dark figures spilled into the house, monstrous shadows animated by an unseen force, their forms writhing and twisting like smoke caught in a tempest. The room plunged into darkness, the flickering bulb overhead surrendering to the shadows. Lila's breath caught in her throat as she could barely make out the sinister shapes advancing toward them. Each movement sent shivers slithering down her spine. These figures were not human. They were grotesque mockeries of life, mouthing her name in twisted, broken tones. "Mommy, help!" Jamie's voice was barely above a whisper, yet the tremor in it pierced through Lila like a dagger. "Hold on," she urged, her voice fierce but wavering in the bitter cold. Keeping the knife raised, she tried to shield her children with her body, feeling the weight of their fragileness against her. The shadows crept closer, and she could feel their breath, rancid and tainted, swirling around her. "Lila," the sound coiled around her, seductive and sinister. "You've been chosen." She shook her head, trying to dispel the panic. "No! Get back!" Her fingers tightened around the hilt of the knife, the only comfort in this nightmare. They swarmed closer, relentless, echoing her greatest fears. "You've ignored us for too long. We know your secrets, your past." The words slithered through the air, dripping with malice. Lila's mind raced, digging through the fog of terror for any hint of preparation, a hidden escape route, a glimmer of hope. Nothing. Suddenly, Ruby began to tremble violently beside her. "Mommy, I see them!" Her eyes were wide, reflecting the shadows that danced cruelly between them. "Don't look!" Lila shouted, but it was too late. The shadows wove into grotesque images of faces she had buried. A kinder vision of Joe flashed before her, but it was rapidly swallowed by hollow eyes and twisted smiles. "Join us," they hissed, their whispers morphing into a rumbling like a dying engine. "You belong to us now." "No!" Lila screamed, spilling emotion, a flood of defiance carrying her words. "Get out of my house!" The figures froze, momentarily startled by her resolve, but then dissipated into a pulsating wave of shadow, sinuous and taunting. They began to curl around Jamie's legs, their insidious tendrils stretching toward Ruby. "Mommy!" Ruby cried, her small body now encased in a haze of dark mist. In a desperate, frantic move, Lila charged forward, knife raised, pushing through the thick air. Her heart hammered violently, the walls of her mind wrapping tighter around her as the shadows closed in on all sides. She had only one thought: protect her children. In that moment, as she swung the knife wildly, a flash of blinding light erupted from the blade, illuminating the room, scattering the shadows. They shrieked, a chilling sound that echoed like breaking glass as they recoiled. "Run!" Lila yelled, instinctively turning toward the back door, the way to freedom. But the door they had escaped to stood closed, ominous and imposing. It seemed made of the same dark matter as the shadows, and Lila's heart sank momentarily. It was as if it was breathing, alive, ensuring they could not escape. As if on cue, the door rattled violently. The whispers picked up, now frantic, mocking her attempt to flee. "Where do you think you're going, Lila? You can't run from yourself." Panic gripped her even tighter. They were in her mind, playing with her thoughts like a puppet master tugging at strings. Memories surged back, dark recollections of choice and consequence. The fog around her partially lifted as she came face to face with her own guilt. "Get away from them!" she screamed, determination rising once more. Suddenly, Jamie broke free from Ruby's grasp, stepping forward. "Mommy, wait!" he called, voice shaking. "Don't hurt them. They only want to talk." "We can help you," the shadows whispered, their voices softer now, slipping through the chaos. "Just let go." Her grip faltered. Help? They wanted to help her, but at what price? As doubt clawed at her heart, Lila realized she was at a crossroads. Was uncovering the truth worth risking everything? What lay in the darkness was still a mystery. What horror would she unlock if she opened the door? And then she heard it, a familiar voice cutting through the cacophony, a whisper that could bring the shadows to their knees or push her right into their waiting arms. Who would emerge from the shadows to guide her? The air thickened with dread as the shadows pulsed, undulating with life. Lila turned her focus inward, desperately searching for a way to confront this maze of nightmares. Jamie trembled in front of her, eyes wide with innocence yet tinged with fear. "Mommy, listen," his small voice barely a murmur above the chaos. "They can help us." "No!" Lila shouted, launching herself forward to grab Jamie's shoulder. But as her hand touched him, a bolt of ice coursed through her veins. A whisper crawled up her spine, sending waves of nausea crashing against her resolve. "Join us, Lila, we are your past. We know your truth." They coiled around her thoughts, seducing her with intimacy she couldn't shake. Images flashed of childhood she'd suppressed, memories of laughter, and inescapable guilt. The shadows wrapped tighter, seeping their chilling essence into her mind. "Let them go!" she screamed, but the sound was swallowed by darkness. Ruby clutched her brother tightly, whimpering. The shadows shifted, morphing into a physical threat. They glided closer, darkness spilling from their mouths, taunting her with secrets she had buried long before. A hand darted toward her from the mass, but Lila was faster. She lunged, the knife gleaming in her grip. The moment steel met shadow, a thunderclap reverberated through the room. A burst of light erupted, momentarily freezing the encroaching darkness. In that split second, Lila felt it, a pulse, a heartbeat from the shadows synchronized with her own. There was a rhythm to their torment, a deeply rooted connection she couldn't ignore. "Stop fighting," the husky voices sang in unison, almost tenderly mocking. "You belong to us, Lila. You cannot escape your own soul." She faltered, that small moment of doubt engulfing her. For just an instant she remembered Joe, the grasp of his hand, the way he had looked at her. "Do you really want to be free?" a voice murmured from the black, familiar yet twisted. It struck a note deep in her heart. Was it Joe? Could it really be him? Her mind raced, and she felt the shadows swirling around her limbs, heavy and suffocating. "Mommy, don't listen!" Ruby cried, pulling at Lila's skirt, grounding her. In her daughter's innocent gaze, a fleeting spark of clarity gleamed. "We need to fight together!" The warmth of her children rekindled the fire within her. Lila straightened, shoving fear aside. "No!" she thundered, "you don't own me. I choose my family." With every ounce of strength, she swung the knife again, aiming for the ghostly figures swirling around them. Light burst forth, and this time, she felt the shadows flinch, a tangible moment of agony. But as the shadows scattered there, amid the retreating whirls, she glimpsed a face horribly familiar, yet so deeply distorted it twisted her heart in knots. "Lila, please, let me in!" It beckoned, eyes eating through layers of darkness. The words struck her with a mixture of longing and dread. Was it truly Joe, lost yet desperately clawing for her, or merely another trick meant to ensnare her? Just then, the door they had once hoped to escape flew open, revealing a blinding light that sent the shadows screeching back, their voices ascending into chaos. But Lila's heart raced, pulling her in two directions: the light, the known safety, or the voice calling her back into shadows, back to the truth. "Mommy!" Ruby's urgent whisper cut through her thoughts. "Go!" Lila yelled, determination surging. She took a step forward, but where should she stand? Could she face what lay beyond? With every inch she moved, the sinister voice echoed louder, "You need us, Lila. We can keep you safe, forever." Lila hesitated, caught between the blinding light and the icy whispers tangled in her soul. Chilling confusion overshadowed her. Where would she ultimately belong? And as she lingered in that moment, the shadows writhed, drawing closer once more. What lay behind that open door? And would the voice of the past finally tear her apart, or save her? With the shadows swirling dangerously close, Lila felt time slow. The door beckoned like a gaping maw, the light radiating an inviting warmth that felt like a distant memory. She glanced back at her children, their faces pale, stricken with fear that clawed at her heart. She could hear Ruby's shaky breaths, see Jamie's small fists balled in terror. They needed her, not just a mother but a shield against the malevolence creeping in. "Lila," the voice crooned again, and this time it was softer, an aching plea. "Please. Open your heart." The shadows crawled along her legs, reaching for the parts of her she had buried. Memories erupted in fragments: pained laughter, whispered secrets, and the resonance of loss. Each recollection felt like 1,000 needles pricking her psyche. The need to give in was overwhelming. "What will it hurt?" they murmured. "Don't you want to join them?" "No!" she shouted, her voice trembling but fierce. The knife gleamed in her hand like a beacon of defiance. "I won't let you take them." But the shadows chuckled, soundless yet vibrating with menace. They controlled the room, bouncing off the walls in dark waves. The air grew heavy, swirling with the stench of crushed hopes and lost innocence. Each attempt to push back felt futile, as if the darkness was both her enemy and her own reflection. In the depths of her mind, Lila felt Joe's presence again, tangible, haunting. "Help me find my way back," the words reverberated in her head, a vicious echo pulling at her like an anchor dragging her under. Could this really be him? Was she merely chasing a specter of the man she once knew? "Mommy!" Ruby's voice cracked, snapping Lila back to the present. She was here, alive, and fighting. She had to protect them. This was more than just an escape. It was a battle for their very souls. Tightening her grip on the knife, she prepared to charge at the shadows again. But the darkness thickened, coiling around her like a serpent. Jamie screamed, "Mommy, don't go!" The confidence she found began to quiver. What if she wasn't strong enough? What if she failed them? The shadows seemed to sense her weakness, pulsating with renewed vigor, creeping closer, the whispers turning frenzied. "Join us, it feels good, just let go enough," Lila bellowed. Adrenaline surged as she lunged toward the swirling mass of despair. This time, she didn't hesitate. She thrust the knife into the darkness, feeling resistance, the screams of shadows slashing against her resolve. Suddenly, the light from the door flared violently, illuminating silhouettes of people, ghostly figures extending their hands toward her, familiar yet distorted by grief. "Help us, Lila," they cried, a chorus of voices lost to time and tragedy. They reached for her, eyes wide with an unspoken plea. In an explosion of clarity, Lila felt the weight of her choices. These were not the people she sought redemption from. They were chains, binding her to yesterday's horrors. Fear coiled tightly in her stomach, but anger ignited a fire within. "I don't belong to you," she shouted, her voice echoing through the wide void of the room. But as she stepped closer to the blinding light, the shadow figures rushed towards her, their fingers now icy tendrils seeking to pull her back. "You think they'll save you? They will twist your heart." Lila's breath quickened. Were those true friends or just manifestations of her guilt? With the heart of a mother pounding in her chest, she lunged for the door, desperate to taste freedom again. But in that very moment, the ground trembled beneath her, and a deafening crack resounded through the air. The walls shimmered, revealing not light but deep cracks oozing with dark liquid, tainted and unyielding. Lila stumbled back, and as she did, the shadows lunged, their mouths opening wide in a hunger that felt all too real. What lay beyond the door was still a mystery, but the shadows had awakened something primal, something lost. The choice remained unmade, and danger loomed heavier than the shadows closing in. Could the light truly save her? Or would staying behind bind her forever to the horrors she had once thought she could escape? The shadows thickened, curling around Lila like serpents seeking their prey. She could feel the darkness breathe, every exhalation pulsing with dread. The icy tendrils were inches away, grazing her skin like the touch of death. Fear banged against her chest as she hesitated just for a second. "Mommy!" Ruby screamed again, her voice a lifeline pulling Lila back from the brink. But Lila felt the weight of despair pushing against her, as palpable as the knife in her hand. The shadows whispered sweetly, weaving threads of doubt. "You're not strong enough, Lila. You'll lose them if you fight. Why choose pain?" The rich darkness around her released a sickening sweetness, intoxicating in its pull. It promised solace, relief from the burdens clawing at her heart. Flames of grief flickered at the edges of her vision as she struggled against the gravitational pull. Could she really trust the light? "Lila, join us," the disembodied voices lured her, echoing with the sounds of missing laughter and lost whispers. They beckoned with familiar tones and the pain of longing. Each spectral figure shimmered, faces blending into the fog of her past, twisted yet achingly recognizable. Only they now pined for her, begging her to come home. A quick look at her children, pale, terrified. Jamie was shaking, eyes wide with pure fright, while Ruby clutched her brother, burying her face into his shoulder. That image ignited something fierce in Lila, something primal, a roar rising from the depths of her being. No more hesitation. No more doubts. With a determined shake of her head, she locked her gaze on the door, her last hope. "We can do this," she urged her children, heart thundering with fragile courage. Together. Before she could take a step, the shadows erupted, writhing like a mass of snakes. Jamie cried out, and the darkness lunged at the children, seeking to envelop them whole. "Let go!" it hissed, longing to squelch their innocence, satisfy its hunger with their fear. Panic surged through Lila, igniting an instinctual fury. She charged at the darkness, knife glinting in the dim light as she swung wildly. It pierced the blackness, and ice-cold tendrils screamed, twisting in pain. "Stay behind me!" she yelled, pushing her children back, shielding them with every ounce of strength. They were the light she clung to, the reason to fight past the enveloping gloom. As she thrust again, the shadows cowered, absorbing the blows. Every spark felt like a victory, but for every inch she gained, the darkness clawed back, more resolute and ferocious. "Mommy!" Ruby's voice trembled, but there was something strong behind it. Real determination was flickering to life in her eyes. Lila wanted to believe it could shield them. Suddenly, the floor shook violently. The remnants of the room peeled apart, revealing a void that pulsed with darkness below. The walls hummed, vibrating with the shadow's fury. Desperation clawed at her throat. The world was collapsing, and she could feel the air change, thick with something otherworldly. With a final push, Lila sprinted towards the door, her heart making a frantic rhythm in her chest. The knife glimmered like a last flicker of hope. With one final look back, she uttered a silent prayer. "Please don't let it end like this," but as she lunged, the shadows swirled faster, scrambling for her ankles, ready to pull her under. The ghostly figures reached out, their hands clawing for her, some familiar, some twisted, all part of the darkness. Could she break the cycle of despair? Or would she, too, become a whisper in the shadows? The door swung open wide. Light spilled out, blinding and beckoning. But what lay beyond tugged at the remnants of her hope in a way she had never expected. Was it salvation or unimaginable terror waiting on the other side? Lila leaped through the door, pulling Ruby and Jamie behind her, their little hands gripping hers tightly. They landed on the cold, hard ground outside, exhaling in unison as the blinding light flickered and faded. But the relief was short-lived. The darkness hissed through the doorway, slithering out like smoke, eager to reclaim its prey. "Run!" Lila shouted, adrenaline pumping through her veins as she scanned their surroundings. They were outside, but the landscape was unfamiliar. The sky loomed above them in swirling grays and blacks, a vast expanse of swirling clouds that seemed to tighten around them. Shadows twisted in and out of the trees scattered around the clearing, whispering her name, a sinister echo that sent chills racing down her spine. "Where are we?" Ruby whimpered, her voice small against the howling wind. "I don't know," Lila replied, her heart racing. "But we have to keep going." They stumbled forward, racing over uneven ground, each footstep punctuated by the sound of cracking branches. Lila could feel the shadows stalking behind them, lurking just beyond the periphery of her vision. The temperature dropped, the air thickening with an invisible weight that pressed against her chest. Just ahead, an ancient tree twisted toward the sky like a gnarled hand clawing for escape. Its roots broke through the surface, knotted and gaping, resembling mouths begging for something to feed on. Lila's breath hitched. "We need to hide!" They darted toward the tree, squeezing into the hollow formed by its roots. It reeked of decay, the suffocating scent clawing at her throat. She could hear Ruby whimper softly beside her. Jamie was close, eyes wide with fear. Lila put a finger to her lips, urging silence. As they huddled together, the darkness spread wide around them, swirling like a living thing. The hollow trembled, as if the shadows sensed their presence. Lila pressed her back against the damp wood, feeling its roughness against her skin. She needed to protect them, but panic devilishly gnawed at her resolve. "Mommy, what if it finds us?" Jamie whispered, voice breaking, eyes glistening. "Then we fight," Lila breathed, trying to drone out the chaos around them. But deep down, she wasn't sure. She could hear the vengeful whispers creeping closer, taunting her. "You can't escape, Lila, please, just let us go," she murmured. But the shadows surged forth, diving into the hollow, wrapping around her ankles like icy chains. The nightmarish forms clawed at her, seeking to pierce her thoughts and drag her into their depths. With a fierce yell, she swiped at them, knife poised, but the blade flicked through their forms as if they were made of smoke. The whispers now turned into snarls, a cacophony of rage echoing in her mind, escalating her terror. "Give in! Sacrifice them!" "No!" Lila screamed, hoisting Ruby and Jamie closer. "We want tea! We're not your food!" Suddenly, a thundering roar shook the ground. The ancient tree shuddered, roots breaking apart as if something massive was moving beneath them. The shadows shrieked, retreating momentarily, hesitating like a predator startled by its prey. "What is happening?" Ruby cried, clutching her mother tightly. "I don't know," Lila shouted against the thrum of uncertainty. "But we have to move." They scrambled from the hollow, the shadows swirling back, their furious whispers igniting a primal fear in Lila's gut. The ground trembled again, sending vibrations through her bones. When she turned, she saw a figure rising from the earth. It towered above them, a grotesque visage painted with faces she never wanted to see again. Screams echoed in her ears, familiar voices, morphed into a terrifying chorus that ripped her heart apart. "No!" Lila gasped, struggling to comprehend the horror emerging from the ground. As the figure leaned closer, the temperature plummeted, every breath fogging in the chilling air. Lila tightened her grip on her children's hands. For the first time, she felt the knife slip from her fingers, clattering away into the encroaching darkness. What was this creature, and what did it want from them? The shadows surged again, and that question melted into panic as the ground opened wider beneath them. They were not safe. Not yet. But would they survive the next embrace of despair, or was their fate sealed in the darkness that loomed ever closer? Would this monstrous figure reclaim what the shadows had lost? The figure loomed over them, a massive shadow morphing with a life of its own, revealing multiple faces twisted in agony, a grotesque reflection of Lila's own buried fears. It towered, a tree of pain rooted in despair, and Lila felt her knees weaken. "Mommy!" Ruby cried, clenching Lila's hand, the frail grip radiating pure terror. Jamie stood firm beside them, eyes blazing with determination, like a little soldier facing the might of an army. Lila's heart swelled with both fear and pride. They were standing together. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice fierce despite the uncertainty. She had to rally her strength for them, for herself. "No further!" emanated the figure's voice, deeper and more ancient than anything Lila had ever heard, resonating with a power that shook the very ground beneath them. The faces melded into her memories, Joe's joyful smile, the laughter of friends, haunting echoes of happier times twisted into mockery. "You think you can escape?" it challenged, each syllable a nail into her fragile resolve. Choking back fear, Lila realized the truth: this form wasn't just darkness. It was her past, her mistakes, a reflection of her regrets and lost hopes. It craved her submission, beckoning her to surrender to the darkness that fed on her pain. They could have a choice, though, to fight back with love and light. "No!" she shouted, raising her chin defiantly. "You're not going to take us." With her heart pounding, she turned to her children, eyes shining wide and strong. "Together, we will break this." The words unfolded like wings, carrying strength from each of them, pulsing with the warmth of their love. The shadows shrieked as though their defiance struck a nerve. Lila could feel the ground beneath shifting, the roots of despair quaking against the surge of their unity. Lila scooped up the fallen knife, and, in that moment, it felt less like a weapon and more like a lifeline. The knife was heavy in her hand, but it glowed with a faint light, a hint of hope breaking through the darkness. "Run!" she yelled, nudging her children toward the flickering light that seeped through the scene of turmoil. They dashed forward, hearts racing, every footstep laden with urgency. Lila followed closely, her instincts shouting for survival. She would protect them with everything she had. The shadowed figure roared in anger, its faces twisting into a frenzy, reaching out with shadowy limbs that clawed at the air. Each swipe strained against Lila's resolve, but she pressed on, her heart pounding hard enough to drown out the chaos. Each step felt like a victory, pushing the monstrous form further away. With every inhale, determination coursed through her. They had each other, and that connection was everything. Keep going. We're almost there. As they approached the blinding threshold, the wind howled, furious at the defiance of hopeful sparks. But Lila felt alive. The shadows receded, screeching as the doorway flickered with stormy light, alive in a way she had never experienced. Clutching Ruby and Jamie's hands tighter, she dashed into the light, heart racing. In an instant they were enveloped, the world around them fading before bursting into brilliant color reds, blues, and hues she thought lost forever. The shadows fell silent, shriveling into the distance like smoke dispelled by a gust of wind. They emerged into an open field bathed in golden sunlight, the warm glow wrapping around them like a soft embrace. The laughter of children rang out like music, and the fear that had gripped her heart began to dissolve as Lila took in the beauty surrounding them. Flowers blooming, trees dancing gently in the wind, life thrumming everywhere. "Mommy? Are we safe?" Ruby whispered, her small voice full of wonder and exhaustion all at once. Lila knelt down, cupping Ruby's cheek gently. "Yes, baby. We're safe now," she said, her voice full of emotion. She turned to Jamie, her brave little warrior. "We made it. Together." Tears of relief shimmered in Jamie's eyes as he hugged Lila tightly. "I was scared, I know." "I was too," Lila admitted, her throat tightening. With gratitude. They stood together, enveloped in the warmth of the sun, the shadows from before fading, never to be forgotten but no longer looming over them. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. It would always be a part of their story, but so too would be this moment of light. As Lila looked at her children, the weight of what had transpired began to lift, replaced by the strength forged in that battle. They were free. No more burdens. No more shadows. Just the three of them stepping forward hand in hand into a future unseen. "Let us go create new memories, okay?" Lila suggested softly, her heart a little lighter. "Okay." Ruby chirped excitedly, Jamie nodding enthusiastically. Together they set off across the golden field, leaving behind the remnants of their past while embracing the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Filled with laughter and love, they ventured forward into the life that awaited them, a life carved from their shared strength and the bond that could conquer the dark. But before the screen fades to black, you need to subscribe now so you don't miss more thrilling stories that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and support our channel. Flood the comments section with your thoughts on this ending. What did you think? Any theories? And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this epic conclusion. True fans know the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.